Europe is grappling with an intense energy crisis that has spooked all 27 nations in the European Union. They've got no idea how they landed in this precarious situation, and they're also scrambling to figure a way out of the crisis, unsuccessfully so. Governments in crisis really can do just two things. Either they can dramatically decrease spending to deal with an intense capital crunch, which is the case with poor or developing nations, or they can tremendously increase spending. That's the case with Europe. The European Union and its member nations have dramatically increased spending, and governments in the continent are spending to subsidize energy bills for households and industries. They're also spending to nationalize energy giants who would have otherwise gone bankrupt due to Vladimir Putin's energy war. European Union governments have pledged more than 500 billion euros to protect citizens and businesses from soaring energy costs over the past year. That's not all. If Europe's support for utilities via loans, bailouts, and nationalizations is taken into account, the figure climbs up to over 700 billion euros. Just to give you a sense of how gigantic that number is, it's just 90 billion euros less than what Europe spent to combat the COVID-19 pandemic. To make matters worse, the 700 billion euro bill that Europe has so far incurred is far from being the only sum it spends to tackle its energy crisis. Europe's energy crisis is expected to last for several years in the absence of Russian energy supplies. So, the amount which European countries spend in the coming times will well be over 700 billion euros. Here's where things get dramatically scary. European countries haven't pulled out such money from under the rug. They didn't have such cash just lying around waiting to be used. Financing for the 700 billion euro splash has been secured via borrowing, and that's just what makes matters worse. Europe is being battered by sky-high inflation, and recession is now considered an imminent threat to the bloc. Amid such economic stress, European governments are stepping up and making unprecedented borrowings to fund their war against the energy crisis. Recession basically means the economy starts contracting at a high pace. That means economic activity and industrial output shrinks, not to mention investors flee. That could have a long-term impact on Europe's economy. An economy under high stress will be in no position to repay its debts. Jennifer Lee, an economist at the Bank of Montreal, said, and I quote, "I think a debt crisis could very likely ensue given the vast amounts that are being spent as a percentage of GDP. It is necessary though, much like pandemic spending, but will add to the high pile of debt that has already been accumulating." Michael Boskin, an economist at Stanford University, added, and I quote, "I believe several will struggle to avoid debt problems in the coming years, and the result will be painful." He also said it's the heavily indebted countries who end up having problems. Just to give you a sense of how indebted European economies are, here are a few examples. France's debt accounted for 145% of its GDP last year. Germany's debt to GDP ratio stands at 77%, while that of the United Kingdom is 143%. Italy, on the other hand, is estimated to have a debt to GDP ratio of 150%. That's a recipe for